Alright, so welcome back guys. Want your first time here, I'm Vision Hero Boy Entertainment for you guys in our video. Today we're giving you guys a little more of a Power Rangers Fury video. Now if Power Rangers don't your instant over there, hit subscribe button down below, hit that bell icon, there's more Power Rangers content from me. Moving forward. Now let's begin. Now this Fury came from one of our viewers. It is Andrew Rankin in one of my recent videos. I'm going to give you a little shout out there. And one of his questions in regards to what happened to Alpha 5. So I thought this was a very interesting question. So I've come up with 5 possibilities as to what happened to Alpha 5 following his departure from PR in Power Rangers Turbo. So, I got 5, so I'm going to start out here with number 5, and this is probably the one I dislike the most, and probably a lot of you will probably agree with me. And my number 5 theory is that he just retired and is living on Illinois with his friends there. I could see this potentially being something, but at the same time, I don't really like this idea. It doesn't really feel like it fits Alpha's character. It doesn't feel like something he would do. It feels like he'd still want to return to Earth and be with Billy and the rest of the Rangers. I mean, we do know he has friends on Illinois, but it also kind of feels like he'd want to be with the Rangers. I mean, not to say he wouldn't want to be with his friends. It just, I don't know. We don't know a whole bunch about his past before he joined Zordon. So, he could have a strong connection to his friends. But I just feel like it's just, I don't know. From the Alpha we know, it just doesn't feel like it'd be something we'd see in the show or anywhere else in that matter. So, that's kind of why I put it at number 5. Sure, he could be in retirement back on Illinois, but it just feels like it's out of place there, and in my opinion, it's something I wouldn't want to see be a reality. It's just something where I just feel like it wouldn't make sense for the Alpha character. But, it is one of the possibilities, but because I don't really like the idea of it, that's why it's number 5. But, again, like I said, it's a possibility, but from my other 4 possibilities are, more plausible for me and ones that I think make more sense. This was just number 5 because I feel like it definitely is a possibility, even though it's one that I myself and probably a lot of you wouldn't agree with, but I just thought it might be a possibility that he just retired and moved on from helping the Rangers. But again, to me, it just doesn't feel like it fit the Alpha 5 character. My number 4 option, and again, this is the one I'm not a huge fan of, but it's definitely something we've seen in the show, so I'm gonna go with it. And it's that Alpha just is in dormant or storage or deactivated. Now, we know this has happened before. We saw this sort of Alpha 4 in Hard Day Afternoon in that episode, along with in Once and Always. You saw that Alpha 6 was put in storage and was deactivated for a short time when, Adam and them went to go get him and to help fix the morphing grid in Once and Always, or Once a Ranger in Overdrive. So, it's a possibility that he, just was deactivated or something. Again, this isn't a thing I really like and don't think it's something that, would make sense. But, at the same time, I could see it being a possibility. There's a lot of different things that could have happened to Alpha. Maybe he got damaged in a fight. Maybe, he asked to be deactivated. I don't know. Those are some possibilities, but again, it's not my favorite possibility, but it definitely is something that could have happened to Alpha at some point. It would explain why there are more Alphas out there than just, bringing back Alpha 5. Again, there's a lot of reasons why they didn't bring back Alpha 5, but, that could explain some things. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan about this one, but I definitely gotta admit that it's a possibility that, it could have happened, and honestly, I wouldn't put it past them that this is what happened to Alpha in, after the events of Countdown to Destruction and everything. So, that's why I put it at number 5. I think it's a possibility. Do I like this possibility? No, not really. But it's definitely a possibility, and I think, it's something that could be considered, Alpha's fate after Countdown to Destruction. Now, my number 3 possibility, and this is, I think, one that a lot of the fan base also agrees on, is that at some point, maybe when Dark Spectre conquered Altar and captured Zordon, Alpha was able to escape and went into hiding. I think this is definitely a high possibility that this could have happened. The only reason I would be against this one is I would imagine that, Billy or someone would have said something, but at the same time, at the time the Rangers weren't with them, so they wouldn't really know what happened to Alpha. They wouldn't really know, if if he escaped or not. Some of them might assumed he was killed or slash destroyed in battle. You would, if Alpha was, in hiding or something, you'd imagine Billy went out there looking for him. He hasn't said anything. So one, either he went out looking for him and couldn't find him, or two, when he went out there looking for him, he was destroyed. It's definitely a possibility that he's still in hiding, but still in hiding 25 plus years later. Just kind of feels like a questionable thing there. I wouldn't be opposed to this idea. It would make a little bit of sense. Again, at the time, he wasn't with the Rangers. The Rangers wouldn't think of anything of it. Like, you know, did he escape or whatever? Was he in hiding? I don't think that'd be something that was on the Rangers' mind that he was in hiding. I think they'd probably just go to assume like he was destroyed in battle or something like that. So, maybe Billy would just happen to go on a search for him. But at the same time, I think that there was a lot going on after Countdown to Destruction that, it just kind of, the search for Alpha probably wouldn't have been like top priority at the time. I feel like it'd be rebuilding the planet, the Rangers going back to their, high school lives, going off to college. So I would imagine, that was something that didn't happen. We also got to remember at that time, Billy was an Aquatar, so he might have not known some of these information about what happened to Alpha. So it's definitely a lot of possibilities out there as to what happened to Alpha. Definitely, like, you would imagine Billy would have been out there trying to search for him. Again, he is out on Aquatar with the Alien Rangers, so again, he might not know all the specifics of this information. But at the same time, I think you'd also heard some kind of reference to it in Once and Always. Again, there's a lot to pack into Once and Always, so there wasn't enough time to reference what happened to Alpha 5 again. So, that might have been a reason. But again, I feel like they could have done something there. But again, I think, him being in hiding would make sense. And, I'd be fine if this was like the outcome and he's just been out there in hiding this whole time. That'd be actually an interesting comic book idea if he was out there hiding. With the Boom Studios comic, maybe do like a one-off or a mini-series of Alpha off and hiding somewhere. I mean, that'd be a cool story to tell. If that is what happened, I think that'd definitely be an interesting story to tell. That I think fans would be interested in to just do like a one-off comic or like, a mini series following up of what happened to Alpha following Countdown to Destruction, or what happened to him after he left and passing the torch. I think a lot of fans definitely would be interested in something like that. So, maybe Boom Studios could do something like that one day if Alpha is in hiding. But this is just one of the 5 possibilities I came up with. I'm okay with this one. Some people might disagree, but for me, if he's out there hiding, I definitely think, I'm okay with this possibility. I think and plus it opens up a lot of doors for potential more Alpha stories in the future, depending on what they want to do with the franchise and Alpha moving forward. My runner-up option as to what I think could have happened to Alpha is that he's just out there helping the other Rangers. If you look at the other seasons of PR, Alpha 6 is out there helping Adam, or at least that's what we last saw in Once a Ranger. In Forever Red, we noticed that Alpha 7 is out there helping Andros, and in Once and Always, we saw that Alpha 8 and then Alpha 9 are helping Billy. So maybe Alpha 5 is just out there helping another team of Rangers somewhere out in the universe. Yes, of course, you might ask, why isn't he with Billy? But maybe, he's just out there helping someone out. So Billy built his own Alpha version. So, there's so many different Ranger teams out there that he could be helping. Maybe he is helping over at SPA or SPD. Maybe he's there. I think that'd be a pretty cool idea if he was out there helping them, like, get established and everything. I think there's definitely different areas he could be at. Maybe he's with the Lightspeed Rangers. Maybe he's, like, in an early infancy of helping Time Force. Like, there's so many different possibilities as to what, areas of PR he could be in, helping different teams of Rangers. He could be out in outer space, maybe helping Lost Galaxy Rangers. Like, all these Rangers are doing different things in different, stories that we don't get to see. So maybe Alpha just is out there helping them. I think it's definitely a possibility, and honestly, I think it's been an interesting possibility because then, it allows us to see Alpha again, and, depending on, again, what they want to do with the franchise, it opens up for more Alpha stories, but not just Alpha stories, but also opens up more possibilities for other Ranger stories. So that's one of the reasons I like this one. I think it's definitely a possibility, but We just had to see what they would want to do of Alpha in regards to the universe, whether it be in comic form or new TV show coming up. Maybe we even see him in a new TV show. Maybe he, is a part of that group or whatever. I think it's a possibility there. There's so many different things that they could do with Alpha in regards to stories that, I think that they should always leave the door open for Alpha. However, this is honestly my last, positive opinion on regards to what happened to Alpha. So, I always feel like you should always leave the door open. But, you don't have to. You could always kind of shut the door on Alpha's story. And, in a way that kind of leads me to my number one possibility as to what happened to Alpha. So, my number one option / opinion as to what I think happened to Alpha, and it's the one you guys are probably going to hate the most, but it's that he got killed / destroyed in battle during the final fight between Zordon and Dark Spectre. Now, I know people are going to hate this one, and I kind of hate it myself. One, because it happened off screen because, and we didn't get to actually see his demise. But I also feel people are going to hate it just because they don't want to see Alpha actually be destroyed and, just kind of want to see him live out the rest of his life. But I personally think this is the best option that they could have, and so I should go with. I just think it makes the most sense. He goes out, fighting and protecting Zordon against Dark Spectre. I just feel like it makes it a heroic death, and it makes it like a great, in my opinion, even though it's sad, but also satisfying ending to Alpha, sacrificing his life for Zordon. It's just something that I think story-wise makes sense and something that I really like. Do we all want to see Alpha get destroyed? Do we want to think that he's still out there and, doing whatever? Sure. But I think that him going out, defending Zordon, and just giving up his life, it just is a lot more of a heroic move. And it just fits the Alpha character more, in my opinion. Again, if he goes out in hiding, that pretty much means he fled and abandoned Zordon. I don't like that idea. So I just think that him being destroyed in battle and sacrificing himself for Zordon just is one that I think makes more sense to me. I know people might not like it, might disagree, but for me, I think story-wise it just makes the most sense. Do I want this to be what happened? No, I don't think anybody would want to see Alpha destroyed or killed or whatever you want to call it. But I think that, when it comes to Alpha, and since it's been 30 years, I think maybe it's time to, move on to a different Alpha. I know people don't want to say that, but I think, it's a good way to move on with the story if he was actually killed off in battle. So yeah, that's just where I leave Alpha's fate. Again, do I want to see this be his actual fate? No. Does it kind of make a little more sense? Yes. And, I figure it just makes sense more to his character and add more to his story / character. So that's what I put at number one. I know people probably are mad and disagree with me, but I just think this makes the most sense for the Alpha character, as more specifically Alpha 5. I think that when a Alpha goes out fighting or defending Zordon, it just makes him look a lot better and just makes the character overall look a lot more like this big hero besides just a tech advisor for the Zordon and the Rangers. So that's just where I leave it. I mean, there are so many different possibilities as to what happened to Alpha 5 or where Alpha 5 is. I'm sure a lot of fans like yourselves have come up with different theories and ideas of what happened to him. But these are just my top theories as to what I believe happened to him. None of these are 100% confirmed. These are just rumor and speculation. There are definitely hundreds of more possibilities. These are just my top 5 theories and opinions as to what happened to him. But let me know some of your theories / opinions on what do you think happened to Alpha. Do you think he was destroyed in battle? Do you think he's still out there? If he's still out there, what is he doing? All that good stuff in the comment section down below. So yeah, guys, those are my 5 theories as to what happened to Alpha 5. As always, if you like this video, do a big thumbs up and share. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. Hit that bell icon. It's more powering content from me moving forward. And go for me on Instagram, Twitter, which are linked in that section on my YouTube channel. As always, I'm Vision Boy Entertainment, and I'll see you next time.